the Wednesday edition of
Hump
Sideline. Yeah, it's the Hump Day.
Day.
SEC Sidelines Sports Network and SECU got a great show for you today. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. I love this guy. He works his ass off to put out great content. You love college football. You follow college football. You need to be following Connor O'Gara. He'll be up first, followed by Dudley Dawson. Hogville.net. We'll check in talking about the Razorbacks, and Vince Ferrara up in Knoxville, the sports animal, covering the Tennessee Volunteers.
So he is a sports animal.
Yeah, he is a sports animal. He's in on the Vol Network. He does TV for SEC Network, Vol Network for the baseball with John Wilkerson. Man, there's a lot to talk about. You know what? Here's the deal. I think the best thing you can advise people on is this: don't allow other people to control your narrative. They say your team's not supposed to be so good. Well, your team doesn't have to believe that. You can believe it. We're going to figure out how every team mathematically has a chance to have a good year. And we're going to talk with Connor first about spring practice, what he took away from schools in the SEC right after this. And you smash that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner and allow notifications on your Android or iPhone. We're doing shows all the time, podcasts like the one we did on Texas with Ken Capps. It's up there, and Buddy Martin. Great podcast. So, hey, get pen and paper handy. We're coming at you right after this.
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
All right, man. I love this time of the day. Been up since about 5:30. Connor probably has too. And Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South, joins us. And Connor, you know, I like to say there's a preseason, competitive season, postseason, and off season. I guess you can call this one off season. We're 115 days away from the start of college football season. I think that's about the right figure that John Stemler gave us at the Touchdown Club Spring Speaker Series we had Monday night with Paul Feinbaum. And that meeting, I got there a little bit after 5. Paul Feinbaum got there about 5:30, and the meet and greet, because he's from Memphis, has a lot. It was packed. And, you know, when that guy's talking and you're on here, I say, if you want to call something an off season, go ahead and do it. But it's always in season talking about college football with you. How you doing?
I'm good, guys. You know, that's the beauty of the SEC is that there really is no off season, and I get to write about the sport year round. I get to talk about it year round, and that's the difference between the SEC and other conferences. I remember going on Arkansas radio in the middle of March, coming off of year one of the Chad Morris era, and there are still people that want to talk about SEC football, and that is what is so unique about this conference. As somebody that grew up in the Midwest, you can see from my background here, for those who are watching this, I have Midwest roots. It's different up there. It's different up there in the way that it's talked about. And that's not to say that there's not good football, but in the way that it's talked about in the SEC, there is only one. And so, it is the off season, but it's always talking season.
Yeah, and it is. And Connor, I like, you know, when I see you at SEC Media Days and I see you on Paul Feinbaum show, different shows, your attention to detail, the research that you do. What were the biggest takeaways from? And we don't have divisions anymore. And that was a funny topic the other night. And that's the first thing people would say. You got to get out of that habit. But the Florida schools, you're down in Orlando. You've got Florida State, Miami. Are any of those schools looking like they're making a big move? Not to mention South Florida and Central Florida and all those others.
Yeah, I could talk about South Florida for a bit just because of Alex Golish, the respect that I have for him. Had him on the show a month ago.
Let's talk about him.
He's one of these names to watch for vacancies next year. And if that comes about, I think a lot of people are sleeping on the fact that he took a 1-win program and turned him into a 7-win team.
Yeah.
just like that, and did some really, really good things, despite the fact that he did not have really the offensive identity he was hoping for, which is
Yeah.
really what got him to this point in his career. But someone with tremendous perspective, like grew up in Russia, came to New York, fell in love with college football, went to Ohio State, was a student assistant, just a true grinder in every sense of the word. So I have great respect for him and think that he's got big things ahead in his future. But yeah, I think watching, in terms of the Florida schools, I remember thinking to myself, okay, what's DJ Lagway going to look like against college competition physically, right? What's he going to look like when, he's got this big offensive line? Everybody's bigger, because if you watch any of him in high school, you're like, that dude is huge.
Yeah.
And seeing him out there on that field in Florida spring game, I thought, oh my God, that is an early enrollee. You've got to be kidding me. I couldn't believe how much he looked the part from a physical standpoint. And the throw that he ripped for that first touchdown of the game, that throw over the middle where you got to be able to fit it between those two converging safeties. And you've got a linebacker that you've got to be able to make sure it's over the top of him. I thought to myself, I haven't seen a Florida quarterback that can make a throw like that since Felipe Franks. Now, Felipe Franks obviously came in with a different sort of billing, but just from a physical attribute standpoint, DJ Lagway does those things already, and it was very evident. He's still going to go through his growing pains, but it's so intriguing what this quarterback situation is going to look like with Billy Napier now, with a guy he trusts in Graham Mertz, but obviously everybody is going to want to see DJ Lagway.
Yeah, and he's got that Tim Tebow sort of loyalty in a sense to, being a Gator, and leadership ability. He's sort of the AR in his body type, where he's triple threat, where he is, and he's fast. He's got a cannon for an arm.
Yeah.
I mean, just a cannon. And so, and you throw in like a Felipe Franks reference, which I think is accurate. I just think you've got the makings for a very special player. And what a lot of people, or even Coach Napier, talked about in press conferences, like he flipped that switch early too. Everything's coming real fast, and he said as soon as things got a little competitive, you saw him flip over. What I mean?
You can see all the reasons why that guy won so much hardware during his senior year of high school. And it's so unbelievably evident. And it's not to say that it automatically guarantees superstardom or anything like that, but you hit on something important there, the loyalty. I know throughout spring that there are teams that are still trying to get DJ Lagway to come on board. And with the loosened transfer rules, there are still teams that are apparently throwing some money at him. And the loyalty that he is showing to Florida, a program that is not being talked about in the way that it was talked about, as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, and is instead really, Florida is showing up all over if you're coming out with a hot seat list of coaches in college football and Billy Napier's on it, we're asking why he's not on it. So we know what's being said about Florida from a national perspective, and to see the way that guy is staying true to the Gators, a program that isn't, what he grew up with. It's not like he's from the Sunshine State or something like that. No. I have tremendous respect for DJ Lagway. I hope we get to see him play at his absolute best, because early signs are this guy is going to be so fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's fun, Connor. If a dog will bite, he'll do it when he's a pup. You look at his release, and just the little glimpses that we've had. Of course, Brendan, GatorBaitMedia.com, and his dad, Buddy Martin, they're on it, and they know Florida, but you do too, and that's neat to hear your observation of him. And he's a special talent. Mertz is the man, but he's going to be coming up, and everybody's going to be talking. It's got Florida football in the crosshairs. People are talking about it, So, yeah.
Yeah, and Josh Pate has brought up the point, don't write off a team that is good at quarterback. And Josh brings up a good point, because what Graham Mertz did last year, I think a lot of people came into the season, myself very much included in that camp, saying, oh my God, this is the guy that Billy Napier went with out of the portal? Really?
Yeah.
Like, of all the different options that seemed like they would work, he went with Graham Mertz. And I said coming into this year, it would be a good time for Billy Napier to prove us wrong. And I think he did. I felt myself saying that he did a lot of things really well. And there were points last year where they didn't have a single offensive lineman returning from that starting lineup, a year earlier, which was the strength of the team. because of injuries. They only returned one starter on the offensive line, and Graham Mertz really wasn't built to succeed with a situation like that. And I thought he was put in some tough spots, but actually did really well, all things considered. And so you come back this year feeling like this guy, from an accuracy standpoint, from being able to understand the system, he checks those boxes for you. Yeah. And what is it going to look like with him this year? And if he plays really well, can you keep the fan base, engaged with DJ Lagway packages, which are going to be part of this offense? It's just a matter of how much they're going to be there.
Yeah. Well, I think you got to be a little bit lucky in anything as well. I think he, obviously, Billy, I think, looked at talent and assessed that Graham Mertz was the guy, and made that decision. But that's coming off the heels of Jaden Rashada, kind of the explosion, and not to mention after that he came out in press conference and said, we are going to go look for another quarterback in the portal. And he said, we're, so he was not like, oh, this is our guy. This, I think I know he went for other guys, and it didn't as QB1, and it didn't necessarily pan out. And so I think the whole time Graham Mertz had decided to sort of switch his whole mentality, showed up early to school, showed up into practice right away. Yeah. He was immediately immersed himself in the Gator culture and the world. And we do a podcast sometimes with Urban Meyer, and he was a big Graham Mertz, because like I recruited the guy. So I think there was a little bit of luck there. And some good coaching. You got to give Billy credit, for sort of coaching him up in that sense, because, Mertz was headed in a different direction.
He very much was. And look, for those who watched him at Wisconsin, it was underwhelming. Or thinking that the entire time, this is a guy who was U.S. Army All-American Bowl MVP. I mean, this is supposed to be Wisconsin's first game-changing quarterback, and he never really got that. I wonder how the 2020 season impacted him among many others. Obviously, he's not alone in dealing with that, but in that all-important year two, what it could have looked like for him, and it just never really lined up. The development wasn't necessarily there, and in an offense that, he's limited. Wisconsin did things differently. They're not necessarily out here trying to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. I get it from that standpoint, but he made too many mistakes at Wisconsin. And so my question was, is he going to be able to rid himself of those mistakes? Is he going to be a guy that moves the chains? And he did just that at Florida.
Well, and interestingly enough, I know I've said that like 20 times, but I think this story is fascinating because now you've got Graham Mertz returns, right? Which there was, a lot of people didn't know what was going to happen there. He didn't necessarily have to. He could have rolled out, gotten some, some tryouts, and probably hooked on somewhere in the NFL. But he came back. Obviously, the money helps. He got a good chunk of change to come back, close to $1 million. So that's good. But like you said, it was really interesting to see him that transition from Wisconsin and then come to Florida, and he really tried to play a lot of clean games, and I think that's what Billy did. He said, look, you need to start playing clean games, making good decisions. You make good decisions. You got here. Your best thinking got you to Wisconsin. How do we, and I think he got Graham to play within himself and not make those silly mistakes, hold on to the ball a little bit. Don't make that pass. And this year he's come out and says, we want to figure out how to help Graham make those, the right call in those questionable situations again, because we want him to push himself, because that's where he was probably, at every athlete is great, was when you push yourself and make the plays that big plays that other people can't make. And Billy said that's what we're working on with Graham this year, is like, how can we make calculated risks, and push it a little bit more. And I think, that should be interesting to see as well.
They got to stretch the field. They got to stretch the field more like they did against South Carolina. I thought there were a few moments watching that game in which Graham Mertz had check down options available, and then he said, no, I'm going deep. And that was the guy that I'm like, okay, that's what Florida needs, because if the defense is going to continue to be a liability, which, look, I've said it before, I'll say it again, Florida's defense is the single most disappointing unit in all of college football during the 2020s decade so far.
No question.
No question about it. And so you think in the right situation, if Florida was still cranking out top 20 defenses, the year that Graham Mertz had could have been part of a 9-3, maybe even 10-2 type of year. But instead, he's put in some tough spots. And if you're not going to be that guy that's taking those risks downfield and saying, oh, I'm going to do all the heavy lifting all the time, then yeah, obviously you're going to be limited. And that's why Florida did make it to the postseason. But that area, they need to improve drastically. Otherwise, we could see another better version of Graham Mertz. And with the strength of that schedule, obviously that's very well documented, the back end of it, it might not mean a whole lot in terms of wins and losses.
I got to ask you this one. Switching over across, the West, but out West, Ole Miss, they're getting a lot of attention. They're always the hunter. Now they're going to be the hunted. Lane Kiffin had a thing about, he was the one coach that everybody tells me that challenged Nick Saban more than anybody to change. This year he doesn't have to play Alabama. They've got Georgia in Oxford. The schedule is tough. It's an SEC schedule. How good is Ole Miss with those two offensive line starters they brought in from Washington on a unit that won the Joe Moore Award as the best offensive line in the country?
I think Ole Miss is playoff or bust. In the 12-team playoff era, they might not improve from a wins and losses standpoint. This could be another 10-2 type team. But 10-2 gets you in. 10-2 should get you in this year. The schedule sets up really well. I mean, being able to miss Alabama is different, obviously, in a post-Nick Saban world. But you kind of look at it and you're like, all right, well, you don't get Texas. You get Oklahoma instead. You get Georgia at home. And really, there is a path for them to be 11-1. I still think that they have a question about how they stack up against a team like Georgia, because last year was last year, and those results were as one-sided as it gets, and that gap is significant. But at the same time, the dudes that they return on offense, before we even get into the portal stuff, I mean, the guys that they return on offense, with being able to have Jackson Dart coming back, throwing to Trey Harris, Ulysses Bentley the fourth, who I thought took some nice steps last year. And then you look around and you're like, wait, on the defensive side of the ball, you add all these guys, a Walter Nolan, a former number 2 overall recruit. You add Princely Uman-Mielen, who was Florida's only all-SEC defensive player of the 2020s decade so far. So you look at it from that standpoint, and you're like, wait a minute. They could do some things with Pete Golding coming back year 2 in this scheme that makes you feel like they can be better than just a middle-of-the-road at best defense, which is what they've really been for much of the post-Hugh Freeze era. So, yeah, I think Ole Miss is playoff or bust this year. I think Lane being able to kind of get over the hump against an LSU last year and have some of those quality wins, and the Penn State win in the bowl game I thought was huge. But they're returning the best tight end in the SEC. They're returning the best group of pass catchers in the SEC with Caden Priestcorn, Trey Harris, Juice Wells, just to name a few. They've got no shortage of weapons for Jackson Dart. So, yeah, it is very much playoff or bust in the first year of the 12-team playoff.
Another one, Jeff Levy's coming back from Oklahoma. He was at Ole Miss with Kiffin. He's a hell of an offensive mind. He's probably underrated, but about him. But the situation at Mississippi State last year, that was a disaster. I mean, if I'm Zach Arnett, I say, well, let's just keep running the offense. Y'all know how to run. I'll run the defense. But it didn't work out. Where's Mississippi State in your opinion?
Yeah, it's tough. And I remember talking to Zach Arnett a couple of times after he got the job and thinking, I like his approach and I get why he's doing what he's doing. But what he was trying to do was built on getting time. And he clearly did not have much of that at Mississippi State with the way that things went last year. And let's remember, he was allowed to hire an entire staff. This was not just an interim coach situation in the wake of the tragic death of Mike Leach. This was a guy who was being told, hey, if you want to put a new offense in, you have the freedom to be able to do that. And he did that with a roster that needed even more turnover. But that's the question I have right now for Jeff Levy. This is a year 0. This really is a year 0, even for somebody that's a really nice schemer. They have their best deep ball passer since Dak Prescott. That's who Blake Shapen will be. They haven't had the deep ball really available in the offenses that they have run and with the quarterbacks that they've recruited at that position. But I think that they will very much have that. I think it's going to have some 2017 Ole Miss type vibes where you're like, man, against some of these bad teams, they can really light up the scoreboard. Yeah. But then you see the roster depth and you're like, oh boy, this is a team that has turned over half of its scholarship players via the portal in the last 2 years. And that's a lot to be able to try and replace, especially when you're not necessarily signing top 15, top 10 types of classes. So I question what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be a really uphill climb for year 1 for Jeff Lebby. The good news for him, he's going to get more time than Zach Arnett. There's just no way around it. I mean, he's the fourth coach of the post Dan Mullen era in Starkville, which is just stunning to think about. And I think that he will get time, but they're going to take their lumps in this year one, or what I would call year zero.
Yeah, and let's go up to Missouri. We had Dennis Dodd on the show last Thursday, and he writes a lot of great stuff, as you do. Love the college football details. That NIL program they have that allows in-state kids to come in. I'm going to take a stab at it, Connor. The names, because there's Nico Iamaleava. I think I got that right. There we go.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's not bad.
A steamer pack of crystals for me. Now, for Missouri, he's rated the number 6 player in the country out of Lee Summit North up there in Kansas City. Williams Nawarini. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Sure. I know who you're talking about. He's like a top 5 recruit coming in.
Yeah. Big. Now so here's the point, and Dennis pointed that out, that in that 2007 season, you remember when they were number 1 and they played Kansas number 2, the great border war? Gary Pinkel was the coach. 10 of the 11 starters on offense were in-state kids. The only one that was out of state, no surprise, was a Texas high school product, Chase Daniel. Yep. So, Missouri can do it, and they're getting aggressive. But now other states, are going to follow suit, aren't they?
They will. And they will continue to do that. I think Texas just did something really similar to that, if I'm not mistaken. Virginia, I think, as well, is on that. It's popular, but credit Mizzou, because I think coming into last year, we felt like Mizzou had a very defined ceiling in the playoff era, and especially in a post-Gary Pinkel world, where you're like, yeah, but you're recruiting to the SEC now, and it's just a little bit more of an uphill climb. Yeah, you can get some of those diamonds in the rough in the state of Texas, which they've done a really, really good job at doing over the years. If you kind of look back and include like a Nick Bolton in that conversation as well. But at the same time, we kind of like looking at them going, okay, yeah, you're 6 to 8 wins at best. This is just kind of who Mizzou is. And everything worked last year. And everything worked because the perspective Eli Drinkwitz had to hire an offensive play caller, to go out and get Kirby Moore. I thought that made all the difference for that unit. They were able to switch Luther Burden III into the slot after Dom Lovett transferred from Georgia to Mizzou. And it really unlocked the potential of that offense with Brady Cook being able to have a lot of different weapons and having a Theo Weiss and a Mookie Cooper on the outside, being able to hand the ball off to a Cody Schrader, who developed into one of the best 3 running backs in all of college football behind a veteran offensive line. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball, look at all those guys they just had drafted. Mizzou's defense just had 5 guys drafted from that unit that Blake Baker was running. And Blake Baker, of course, becomes now the highest paid assistant in all of college football to go over to LSU. And it's because of the defense that he turned around, a group that he inherited from Steve Wilkes that was terrible in 2021. I mean, I think they ended up finishing 2nd worst run defense in all of college football. They were the worst for most of that year. And that group was awful, but they got the right coaches in there. And when you have the right staff around you, I mean, it just goes to show you, it makes all the difference in the world. And so what will it look like this year? I think I have more questions on the defensive side of the ball. It should be one of the 10 or 15 best offenses in all of college football with what they return, even without Cody Schrader. But yeah, it is an interesting program now, especially as the 12-team playoff era begins. Do they have the upside to be able to make that run and do essentially what they did this past season? I think that's the question everybody has in Columbia.
Yeah, and they've got a pretty cool NIL group up there called, the Tigers, and there's money there. St. Louis, Kansas City. It's a weird state because you've got the Chiefs, who are the top of the world in the NFL, and St. Louis, which traditionally is really good baseball, but it's kind of struggling a little bit. You a Cubs fan or White Sox?
I'm wearing a Chicago Cubs shirt.
I'm sorry.
I got the Cubs. See it. Cubs there.
My apologies. Yep. All right, confirm this story. I've got so many friends that just find ways to go to Chicago for business trips. Hit the Daily Deal out there at Wrigley Field. Do the Nuns still run those parking lots? They used to do that. They used to make a lot of money for the church.
I haven't been in any situation that has forced myself or my family to hand over straight cash to nuns. I haven't seen that. I wouldn't rule it out. But I do have childhood memories of being parked in a just these random parking lots, because that's the thing about Wrigley Field, is that it is in the heart of Wrigleyville. It is the heart of the north side of Chicago, and it's like in a neighborhood. Yeah. And so it's not like you have this massive parking lot with just all this ability to be able to roll up to the stadium and tailgate in parking lot. Like it's so not that, because it's in a neighborhood. And the way that I remember parking for this game when I was in 6th grade, we were like backed into this lot at night. And we probably paid $60 to be able to park there or something like that. And we are backed in. We like could not get out until this person left. So it was one of those experiences that I will never forget. And anybody's trying to make a buck off Wrigley Field Park.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Coach Scully and Coach Lass, two of my coaches growing up, were both from Chicago, and they used to always tell us that. They taught us. And Coach Scully, Cubs fans are, it's just unbelievable. I think when you wear a Cubs fan, lifelong Cubs fan, that says I am as loyal as it gets. That's what that means to me. And because I grew up, when Harry Carey and Steve Stone, we come home after school before practice, he go, Harry Carey here with Steve. He'd always say, hello to all the shut-ins and the nuns at St. Mary's Convent down in Naperville. Hello, everybody. But you just can't get any better. Just love it. But look, I know you got to go. You got a busy day. Congratulations, 11 months old now. That is awesome. And we really appreciate you taking time to join us. And we'll get you back on, hopefully, again in the next week or two if you can, because it's no off season. I'm with you. It's just maybe you slow down from 110 to 90. But you don't take off.
Not anymore.
It's a state of mind. Yeah, exactly. So what are you writing about? What's come on your table, and how can people follow you and keep up with all your great work?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Got a lot of football related content on SaturdayDownSouth.com right now. I wrote today about Nick Saban, how I think the draft coverage kind of showed you why he's going to be so good on College Game Day this fall. Something that I'm really looking forward to seeing his insight. I mean, second to none. And, got something in the works about Luke Haas potentially filling the Brock Bowers void in the SEC as this next great tight end, somebody that a lot of SEC fans need to be aware of, despite the fact he only played 4 games last year, season-ending injury, was the best offensive player on that Arkansas team. So, lots of great stuff. SaturdayDownSouth.com, tons and tons of coverage, not just football.
I love that website. I do. You guys do a great job. Yeah.
Let's put them definitely on the SEC Sideline Sports Network and SECU, because you really work your ass off, and it shows. Because people say you don't just show up a week before the Masters and say we need to get those greens cut. It's a year round. It's a year round passion. By the way, I got to ask you, the painting, the print on the wall, the frame print. What is that? A Chicago Cubs,
It's Billy Williams. I got that. I actually interned at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and that was my gift. It's a lithograph, and that was the present. I think they only made like 1,500 of those.
Wow.
They made like 1,500 of them, and we each got to pick out one, like us 12 interns at the Baseball Hall of Fame. The summer that Ron Santo got inducted, it was like one of the best summers of my life. Very hard to beat, and we were able to. That was my little keepsake.
Oh, that is awesome, man. Hey, thank you so much. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. Follow him, keep up with what he's doing so you'll know what is happening. We'll see you next time.
Gentlemen, appreciate it.
You bet. Great stuff. That's and there's another one who works his butt off, Dudley Dawson, hogville.net. And, man, that's the interest in college football, Dudley and Brendan and everybody watching. It never wanes. There's just always angles that you're taking and what's next, what's going to happen. And I can tell you, Dudley, living in Memphis and spending a lot of time in Tennessee and Arkansas, everybody's talking right now about John Calipari and what he's doing and the transfer portal. Hell, we were at the Touchdown Club in Memphis Monday night. Paul Feinbaum was there. He was talking about what are the odds that I'd be talking about John Calipari? And he said, you Memphis people, y'all know him as well as anybody. And I don't think he wanted to leave Memphis, but I think it was time to go to Kentucky. And it was time. He should have left probably 4 or 5 years ago. 10 years at one school is a long time. But what's been the reception around the natural state? I can't imagine it's been anything other than, holy cow, this guy could recruit you to walk the Green Mile and you'd be smiling.
Yeah, a shock was the first thing, because I don't know that anybody thought that he would ever end up here. But, he has. And obviously Blake Lawson, who was the only guy left on the team, was looking at that starting lineup for a while. But now he's recruited 6 guys, so Blake's going to have to come off the bench. But they're very excited. I mean, with the baseball doing as well as they have,
Yeah.
Football getting some, some pretty good transfer portal guys, and obviously with what's going on with basketball and softball and track and field and golf's in the NCAA tournament. I mean, it's a pretty good role here right now. We always talk about how football kind of drives the narrative and all that, but coming off that 4-8 season, that wasn't what they needed. But I think the overall state of the Razorback Union is good at the moment.
Yeah, and the Razor's Edge, that's your NIL collective. Arkansas just a couple of years ago finished the $167 million remodeling of the football stadium down there in the end zone, luxury suites and all, weight room, everything is state of the art. Their facilities, they lack for nothing. And a lot of schools have been in that facilities arms race. But now, before the kids leave, their entourage they have with them, their Swifties, around them, they're going to say, what kind of NIL deal do you have? It's going to be fun. Houston Nutt's going to be in Memphis Monday night, Touchdown Club, Spring Speaker Series. Go to the Memphis Touchdown Club website and get out there. He'll be at the Hilton this Monday, 5:30 p.m. And you mentioned him or someone. Could you imagine him with a Razorback NIL collective? What it'd be like to try to say no to him? He goes, the Razor. I mean, his red blood's coming out of.
Since the last time we talked, I've had the opportunity, actually last Thursday, to sit down for 2 to 3 hours with Chris Bauer, who is heading up the Arkansas.
Yeah.
The opportunity to kind of, to find, some of the stuff, maybe some of the misconceptions I had, maybe some of the misconceptions that, are just out there as the narrative. Was very impressed with him. And I think that Arkansas's got a chance there to really do a good job at coming back from being behind in the race. Was how I will put it. I don't think that they were ready when this thing got going. They fell behind. I think they've lost some recruits in different sports because of it. And I think they're in a good situation with Chris Bauer right now. And listening to him talk for a pretty long time about different things that go into what they're trying to do. I'm very impressed with how they're going to try to necessarily manage this wild west thing that's been going on. They're going to take some control back in how the kids are going to get to make as much money as they can, as much money as they want. But they're going to put them in situations to where it's the best for them, instead of everybody just walking around and, for lack of a better way to put it, throwing money at their face.
I read an interesting story about Luther Burden, the wide receiver at Missouri. His NIL deal, they were thinking he'd get like a used, like a pre-owned Mercedes or something to drive around. I think he was driving just an ordinary sedan. I think that's pretty cool. And golly, if you've, again, managing wealth for clients, which I do, none of them have ever in 33 years driven up in a Lamborghini, a Maserati, or a Bentley. I mean, guy worth $50 million and he's driving a Taurus, or he's driving a 12-year-old F-150. If they could, I guess I'll be completely transparent. That's what angers me the most about NIL is all this flash, because what depreciates faster, clothes or cars? It's all of the above. Why not invest your money into the stock market? Now, look, it can go up and down, but it's the same argument about if I talked to a guy that's a fundraiser at an SEC school, which will remain nameless this week. Two things are funny. In your worst years are typically your best fundraising years, because the fans are scared it's going to get worse. Number two is that with the demand for tickets, priority seating, it's unbelievable how much in attendance last year went up. But all that being said, Dudley, you're a historian. Go back 40 and 50 years ago. I mean, there were certain schools where attendance was you were packing the stadiums, but the crowds, they're better than they've ever been. The product on the field is as exciting as ever. So why is everybody running around with the hair on fire.
Well, I think you say go back 40 years. I can remember going to the football stadium here, and when I first started covering Arkansas,
Yeah.
and it was, you remember it, it was
41,000. Yeah.
no
yeah.
lights. It was kind of a little field house down there at the end. And obviously, in the arms race, they got much better as we went along. And Coach Broyles obviously deserves a lot of credit for that. A lot of people have come in and helped out since then. But, that Arkansas doesn't want for facilities now. So, it's been a vast change. But to answer your question, I think that, it's the same mentality and philosophy and angst that we have with society, in that we want it like it used to be. Everybody working hard, everybody sticking to their commitment, everybody wanting to be a Razorback, or wanting to be a part of the company that you work for. And now I think, obviously, with the free agency that basically is in college now, whether it's true or not, the loyalty aspect from the fans kind of wavers with the loyalty aspect from the participants in athletics. And when they hear that this guy wants $1 million, this guy wants 800,000, this guy wants this and that, it takes some of the luster away, because they all remember back, we've always talked when we were growing up, that you had a commitment, you stuck to it. If you didn't start, you worked your way till you got to play, instead of just hightailing it out of here, which was one of my grandpa's favorite words, hightailing it. We never got to hightail it in the Dawson Johnson household.
Yeah. Well, to tell you how crazy the world is, you got college students taking over a building, and one of their demands was that catered food be brought in. I mean, it's just, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, hey, I'm all for it. This is about as political as I'll get. I'm all for protest. I'm all for voicing your opinion. But once you start tearing up crap, that's just not cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. And but you know what? You got kids. I got kids. I'm on any minute going to get a call from my daughter or from my son-in-law that Alexander, Robert Alexander is here, but hadn't heard it yet. It's today is a week late, but as she reminded me, my first kid, my daughter goes, Dad, first kids don't always come on time. I said, yeah, you were not on time. And, we had no idea. It was like, when is this going to happen? But, our kids, man, they mind work. You know what? You can get caught up in all the stuff going on with NIL and the portal and all, but if you raise your kids right, they're going to understand they're going to have to work for what they want. And I think a lot of people, we talked about DJ Lagway, quarterback down at Florida, who's, a high school kid that came in early. He's getting offers, still trying to take him away, but he's showing loyalty to the Gators that he wants to be there. I'm thinking in today's climate, if you stand up and say, I don't care, I'm going to work for what I believe in, I mean, you're a rock star. You'll get NIL. NIL is way more than just the 3 or 4 years you're in college, Dudley. I mean, you think about guys look at Joe Klein, from Slaterville, Missouri. He had a hell of a college career, hell of an NBA career. John Calipari talked about him at his press conference. But you know what people remember is he came from Notre Dame. He transferred back, but he loves Arkansas. He's got a couple of Corky's barbecue restaurants in Little Rock. That's what NIL really is supposed to be, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the way that it was brought in. And obviously, I think, I've read some stuff about where they had, some plans that maybe they could handle it a little bit better than they did, but they never got them finalized, never got them, put into meeting. And that's what they're trying to go back and do that now. It's a situation that, again, when I was in college and involved in athletics with the University of Arkansas basketball, I was, hey, we're getting enough stuff. We don't need anything else. But then now, as I've gotten older and gotten wiser, I would like to think, as it's gone along, I understand that the availabilities for the student athletes, as they begin to call them somewhere, 10, 15 years ago, you should be, similar to what the coaches are allowed to do. Go where they want to, make some money off of the big pile. So I've realized that over the years. but it's just, I hate to keep, getting after NIL, but I just want it to be fair and just, the world isn't fair, though, obviously.
Yeah. Well, we got that big pending lawsuit going to be coming out in January, House versus NCAA. And I guess that if the NCAA loses, and I don't see how they're going to win, because it becomes an antitrust deal. You cannot deny any American, it's in our Constitution, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And antitrust laws are there to prevent you from, suppressing someone's ability to earn a living. So the NCAA could have dealt with it, but they let the Supreme Court decide, and they did 9-0. As divided as this country is on a lot of issues, they were 9-0 about that one. So what I think, you know how it'll fix itself? I say this ad nauseum, the free market. There's only so many times you can go to these donors and that before they say, I've given to this crap for 7 years and my ROI is nothing. I'm going to put that money I was given to NIL back in the stock market with Rob Brown. There we go. But, and now I do a lot of estate planning where we do planned gifts to different colleges, millions of dollars to different schools. But I can tell you what, those gifts can be rescinded. And those people watch what goes on those campuses. I'm talking, you see that stuff going on in New York. They'd be like, I'm withdrawing that gift. That's how you get people's attention. And that's how NIL is going to end up working itself out. All right, so Razorback football. Looking at this team right now, Bobby Petrino is a master at coaching quarterbacks. Let's talk about that transfer you brought in from Boise State. Again, we talked about it a little bit last week, but receivers, running backs. Let's talk about that. Rocket Sanders is at South Carolina, but after the way he last year went to Dallas and rehabbed on his own, I mean, he left the team a long time before he left the team. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's what it's something similar to what Nick Smith did with basketball. I don't want to get on them too much because they did what they thought was best for them for their professional careers. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. They're going to be okay at running back, I think, even though Dominic Johnson, who was a couple of years ago, you arguably was their best running back. He was the guy before Rocket Sanders became the guy, and he's transferred out now and going to seek some carries. And I think that I don't blame him for that because he was going to be third, fourth, fifth in line. They got a new one in here, Rodney Hill, who started out at Florida State, and he thought, well, that's enough people in the room. I'm going to go find a new room, and certainly that's what he's doing. The receivers, I think, they're going to be fine, even though they're looking for one more in the portal. They've brought in 5 in this second portal period. Still have 7, I think it is, that Otis has been reporting scholarships available, which is just nuts to me. Still trying to get some more linebackers and defensive line, even though they've added some. They just that's a position you can never have enough of.
Yeah, I agree. Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net. Great stuff. Stay on with us. We got Vince Ferrara, the sports animal up in Knoxville, Sports Animal Vol, and the Vol Network. And Vince, man, last week you were talking a lot about the draft. Mm-hmm. And golly, I see, that was fun. And Nick Saban did offer some incredible insight in the draft. He's going to be fun to watch on ESPN. But let's talk about the Tennessee players that were taken, the fits, good or bad, in your opinion.
Yeah, appreciate it. Great to be on with you guys. And I agree on Saban real quick because there are some people who are like, Nick Saban, like he doesn't have a personality. Give me a break. His insights, the credibility he brings to the table, he was outstanding. And there's no surprise at that.
Pat McAfee, Nick Saban. Some of us like the other one.
Yeah. Right. It's a very different delivery. But you know what? I like the meat and potatoes of it that he brings to the table. I want to learn from those guys. Yeah, there's a time and a place for the hype and the energy. I get that. But, man, I really enjoy in the draft. You want to focus on what's next, the players, the fit, all that kind of stuff. So to your question, Rob, on the fits, Tennessee had 3 players taken. That's what I thought. I wondered maybe about McAllen Castles, the tight end, who was actually on our show this morning. We just talked to him. Excellent tight end. He signed on as a free agent with the Eagles. But the Vols had 3 guys taken. Jalen Wright, I thought, would go on day 2. He went in the 4th round to the Miami Dolphins. And I remember last week I mentioned the San Francisco 49ers as a potential good fit for Jalen Wright. Well, I wouldn't even like putting 2 and 2 together. What are the Miami Dolphins? They do what the 49ers do in their offense because McDaniel came from there. Now, I didn't think that they would take him because they have 2 outstanding running backs in the former A&M back in Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert. But you know what? It's the National Football League. You need 3 guys these days, and you just never know, contracts and injuries, all that kind of fun stuff. And Jalen Wright is a speedster, and that's what that offense is. Yeah. And so it fits completely to what they do. They give up a 3rd-round pick to go get him. So I really like that fit for him, even though that's not the quickest path to playing time. Like, say, the Dallas Cowboys maybe? Like, why would they draft a running back? Oh, wait, we're gonna bring in an end-of-the-road Ezekiel Elliott, and you won't have to bring in a young back. I mean, unbelievable. But and then the 2 other guys that were drafted, Joe Milton in the 6th round to the Patriots. Interesting, right? Because the Patriots are one of those teams to take a quarterback at the top of the draft, and number 3 overall in Drake May. But it sounds like after Jacoby Brissett, they may want to move on from the guys they had last year. And he's one of those guys that has special traits that you just want to take a flyer on. That's what you're doing with those 6 and 7
you're right.
picks. Yeah. And then the 3rd one was Kamal Hadden, defensive back, who was Tennessee's best DB until he got hurt. And the defense was not the same without him. And the Kansas City Chiefs draft as good as anybody in the league. They scout better than anybody in the league. And they've had a bunch of young DBs that have worked out for them. With all the money tied into their stars, they have to have their rookies and young players contribute for them. They had a bunch on defense. They know the secondary there. And so Kamal Hadden's in a good spot. They traded L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans, so that there's an opportunity for him to maybe win the number 2 cornerback spot there. So it's a good fit there and a good culture for him as well. So those are the 3 spots, and they had 9 guys. I won't run through all of them, but they had 9 guys that signed as undrafted free agents around the league.
Well, I think a scout and a GM in the front office, the executives that go out and look, they're no different than money managers, portfolio managers that manage a portfolio of stocks, bonds. They've got to have a good eye for value. And if you're looking for deep discount value, if you love a stock that was at $100 and now it's at 70, but it's paying a dividend of 4.5%, that and that's a name brand, that's a value. Well, I think you go to schools like Tennessee, you go to Arkansas, where they've proven that they can send guys that are NFL ready, and they also have played a tough schedule. And you're right. You get 4 preseason games, 17 regular season games. If you get into the playoffs, that could be another 3 or 4. So, I mean, you've got to have a lot of players. But what's interesting is the guys on injured reserve, Dudley, they're always ready. We always remember the most famous Babe Laufenberg laying at the beach drinking a road soda, gets a call, hey, we need you. He's like, I'll be there. He played, 18 years in the NFL, guys? Babe Laufenberg.
Yeah, it is still playing that, playing off of that because he's, the Cowboys were the Cowboys announcers and obviously has a lot of things that to do with him. But yeah, I was told that somebody was telling me, Brandon Allen, quarterback here. He never got to start, he should have been a backup. I see he's been a backup in the NFL. It's not been a backup in the Arena League. What are you talking about? I'd take that right now. Yeah. Get the money, maybe not the big contract, get the money, not get hit, hold the clipboard, and then if you're needed, be ready. And that seems like a pretty good job to me.
Yeah. And interesting, Brandon Allen. Sorry, Rob. Brandon Allen, guys. He is now, you're right, he's been in the league. He is now in that quarterback room behind Brock Purdy with former Tennessee quarterback Joshua Dobbs, who was signed on there. So those two kind of competing for that 2 and 3 spot in San Fran.
Yeah, he was last year. He was one snap away. Yeah, after the backup got one snap away from being in the NFC playoffs in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look again, Brock Purdy's a great example of it. When Bledsoe went down, Tom Brady came in. And Tom Brady prior to that was known for the comeback in the game against Alabama in the Orange Bowl. But you got to be right. Shane Matthews, he's on Buddy Martin's show every Monday night, and sometimes I'm on with him. 14 years in the NFL. They say, he was holding the clipboard a lot, but he knows, and he played, but 14 years to be good enough. How many people can say that? And Shane Matthews has a mind for football like a computer. Some interesting stuff on the draft that I read on The Athletic. And, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, 1, 2, 3. That's the fourth time that we've had 3 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 in the draft. Guys, of those 3, who do you think is going to have the quickest positive impact on the team that drafted them? And I think a lot of that has to do with who's in front of them, too.
Well, I'm going to take Caleb Williams because I think Chicago's a pretty good football team. And they were 7-10. They didn't get that pick because they were, they sucked. They got it because they had traded it the year before. So, I think that they all 3 are going to be decent quarterbacks. But I think he's in the best position to succeed in winning is how I, usually gauge quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Just to say a different name, it's not Drake May, we know, because the Patriots still have a lot of roster rebuilding. So I will go with Jaden Daniels. I think more from a long-term success. I feel a little bit more like I have more trust in him than I do Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams' skill sets are insane. I just wonder about the intangibles, the maturity, the business mindset for him. I mean, he was at the draft talking about how he loves the Chicago community, and the most important thing is a relationship with like the custodians and everybody in the building. I'm like,
there you go.
You're not even there yet. Like,
yeah.
Just because you're feeding like what your PR reps are telling you to say. I'm not buying that stuff. So how's he going to connect with his team? But the talent is on question, as Dudley said. From a set up your top first round draft pick to be successful, unlike Carolina last year with Bryce Young, it didn't help them out hardly at all.
No,
that's a great situation to put up some early success. But long term, to me, I'll go with Jaden Daniels because he has a lot more experience in the college game. There's things that Caleb Williams, he's had one offense, basically the Lincoln Riley offense he had at Oklahoma and USC. That's all he's known. It's going to be different for him. Jaden Daniels has proven he can adjust. He's seen so much. He's faced SEC competition. I think it's Jaden Daniels, and they do have a pretty good offense that they have improved even more. Got Austin Eckler to help with that running game. Terry McLaurin is a great wide receiver. So building that offensive line. So yeah, they maybe don't have the talent that the Bears do yet, but I have more trust in Jaden Daniels in Washington.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll agree with that for the long term. I was just speaking of there earlier. I think as we said, Caleb's kind of set up, especially with that defense. He should be able to, not have to be in too many bad situations early.
Yeah. Well, I think if you come out of the SEC versus a lot of these other conferences, you've been running 5Ks on a flat course. In the SEC, you've been running a lot of hills, And I always think about going to the state championship with these middle school cross-country kids. Victor Ash Park out there in Knoxville. Not a lot of hills, but some inclines. And we did a ton of hill training. That's why we got there every year. But the point is, it's the recognition of the speed of the game. And they talk about the windows close so much more quickly. Receivers in high school, if you're a dominant receiver in high school, well, who were you playing against? Then you get in there to practice, whether it's Fayetteville or Knoxville, it doesn't matter. You're going to be going against 100 guys on the practice field who could probably say, I was the best kid on my team.
Yeah.
How can you handle that?
Sorry, Rob, to your point, Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network, who I think is the best of those draft analysts, he was breaking down tape on, I think, a player from Yale. And he was like, well, the thing that stood out to me in my notes that I wrote down is playing versus civilians. Guys that are going to be running like Fortune 500 companies in every life as opposed to in the NFL.
That's I remember when there was a player named Tucker Dearth out of Homewood or Vestavia, one of the top 4 or 5 players in Alabama, and he was in a class at Auburn, and everybody was talking about, all my Birmingham friends, about how good he was, and he got on the practice field in the same freshman class with a guy from Sandersville, Georgia, Washington County High School, Takeo Spikes, and sadly, the kid gave up football after 3 or 4 days of practice as a freshman. But I think when you got a kid that comes in like Takeo was born, God put him here. Like Bill King, who was the recruiting guru forever on AM 1510 WLAC in Nashville, said, you could parachute in from outer space and see Takeo Spikes and go, that guy is the greatest player I've ever seen. Like when Julio Jones came out of Foley, Alabama, they're talking about that guy when he was in middle school and high school. When greatness comes, like I love talk Tim Horton. What was it like recruiting, Darren McFadden to Arkansas? He goes, well, Rob, he goes, when I went on the visit to the house, they were all sitting on the front of the house wearing Arkansas gear, calling the Hogs. He goes, that was a pretty easy recruit, but he said Darren McFadden, he called him. He just said he was just, the first time I ever saw him play was September of 2005. I was up in Hardy for fall break. They were playing Alabama, and he had like a 70-yard touchdown run. And I told Bama Boyd, I was with him up at the cabin, I said, it's the greatest running back I have seen since Bo Jackson and Herschel Walker. He's that good. And a few days later at the quarterback club in Birmingham, I saw Pat Dye made a comment, that's the best running back since Bo Jackson. I mean, you just know it when you see it. So I'm going to throw this at y'all. We're going to do a little back and forth here. Start with Vince. Going into this season in the SEC, who is that it player? Nico Iamaleava. Did I get it right?
You did. Well done, Rob.
Yes. Yes. I'm not going to try it again, but the guy. Yeah. How good is he?
Well, we had McAllen Castles on and mentioned that, and he's, they're both California guys. They're really tight, and he was raving about Nico, and obviously so. I mean, he was there and see him in the locker room, but he said the thing that people don't see or know about him is his poise in all situations, doesn't get too high, too low. And that's one of the observations I had from practice is this guy's about business, man. He's about taking advantage of every rep and communicating with his receivers and getting better. It's just a very different vibe they had in practice. He's a 5-star that is not sitting on his recruiting ranking or NIL deal, any of that kind of stuff. And the fact that so many guys are drawn to him, I think you're going to see a much different Tennessee offense, probably closer to what you saw 2 years ago. Maybe not quite that, because he is still in his first season as a starting quarterback, and there are going to be some bumps in the road. Hendon Hooker was mature, more experienced and all that. But it's going to be, I think, closer to that than maybe what we saw with the inconsistencies with the deep ball and the explosive plays from a year ago.
Yeah, Hendon Hooker out of Greensboro went to Blacksburg, played for the Hokies. He was a special player. Dudley, who's that it player you see coming on the scene at Arkansas? Because, I mean, you think about that backfield, Felix Jones out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Darren McFadden, North Little Rock, and Peyton Hillis out of Conway. I mean, that's like, hey, man, you just got a Mercedes. That's really cool. And you pull up in the parking lot next to a Rolls Royce and a Bentley. I mean, you're still got a hell of a car, but you don't have that kind of backfield this year. But who was a player maybe like he was just talking about Tennessee?
The easy answer is Taylor Green, because he's going to be running the offense. He's big quarterback. He's the easy answer that is going to put up a lot of yards. But my personal pick after watching spring practice and spring game and all that is Jaquindon Jackson, the running back who transferred from Utah and who had an outstanding spring practice. And he's a guy that I think Sam Pittman put it best. And if you need 5 yards, he's going to get you 6. He needs three. You need three. He's going to get you four. It's one of those situations. You watch him on tape. He was a little hurt last year. Ended up with over 800 yards. But when you look at him, and you also look at Braylon Russell, who I think is the back of the future. He's 6'2", 253, and it's nothing. It's not. There's no fat and all that. It's just all muscle. I mean, that dude is a grown man at 18. And those are two names that I would toss out there. The others, that have been around here, the wide receivers, obviously, some of the other running backs, you expect it to do well. But if you're looking for a surprise name or somebody that's got that it factor, as you said, those are my guys right now.
Well, and the fact that Bobby Petrino is spending so much time with Taylor.
Yeah, he's the it guy, really. I mean, if we want to be honest about it, he's the it guy. He's the guy that the offense.
Yeah, and Jacoby Briswell, who was from, I think, Morrilton. And, look, there have been some good quarterbacks.
He went to North Carolina, transferred here. He transferred back to North Carolina this week.
Yeah, that's what's going on. I mean, and he was a really good quarterback coming out of high school, big time. So that tells you, Taylor Green, if Bobby Petrino thinks the quarterback's good, that's like, Michelangelo saying you got ability as a painter. Vince, you had another one you wanted to mention to us as a potential rock star in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah, and he's getting a lot of accolades nationally already, and that's James Pierce Jr., edge for Tennessee, wears number 27, had 28 tackles, 10 sacks, 14 and a half tackles for loss. Last year is just a sophomore. He is draft eligible for next year. There were draft analysts that said that if he was in this year's draft, he would have been the number one defensive player selected. And Pro Football Focus has him as their number one overall player for next year's draft. Of all of them, James Pierce Jr., number one overall, GoVols 24/7, or just 24/7 Sports. They did a mock where they put teams with them, and they have him number one, the Carolina Panthers next year. Now, I've talked to scouts that are like, well, maybe he's got to do a little bit more before we go there, but you're projecting. And James Pierce Jr. with an outstanding defensive line, and if they can get another pass rusher on the other side to make teams pay and take some of those double and triple teams he's going to see. He already got some of that last year, but if he develops and rounds out his game and doesn't just rely on the freak athleticism he had a pick six in the bowl game against Iowa, and dropping back in coverage. Man, this guy, Tennessee it's been a while since they've had a player that probably Peyton Manning. The last time you had a player high in the draft, Darnell Wright was a first round pick. A couple of years ago, but now we're talking the top of the draft. Those are rare, but he's got that kind of ability, especially if he has a big season, and people nationally have already taken note, and NFL has, for James Pierce Jr.
Albert Hainsworth is another one I think about, big time defensive lineman. Dudley, you look at what happened in the draft, 23 offensive players taken in the first round, no running backs, safeties, or linebackers in the first round. The running back position, it's been devalued to the point where everybody's running back by committee. I just can't even imagine if we're going to have any time for the next foreseeable future, at least, someone break the all-time rushing record at any school.
Yeah, and as you said, the committee thing is certainly that's going to be the case here this year in Arkansas. Vince mentioned Dallas. He was drafting it. Man, I was sitting there just rooting for the kid from Tennessee to go to Dallas or Cody Schrader from Missouri, just somebody. During that, and I knew they were going to bring in Ezekiel Elliott, and I know he's probably got a little left in the tank, but still, this whole thing, have always been a bell cow guy. Or at least if you don't have a lead back, you don't have a rushing attack to me. You're just going to kind of throw it out there and see what happens. Jerry Jones has done wonderful things for the state of Arkansas, the University of Arkansas. But man, come on now. You had to. I know the running backs be valued, but you got to value it a little bit.
Well, you're right, and that's what's so hard is. SEC football traditionally is, you got to be able to run the ball, got to be able to play defense, have really strong special teams. Vince, looking at the league right now, Oklahoma and Texas, they're in. It's the engagement period. The marriage is going to be consummated July 1st, okay? Mm-hmm. So you can see in my background on my SEC map made by Barnwood Brenda in Batesville, Mississippi. You can get you one for $800. That's hand carved that one's out of Cypress. She does them out of Barnwood, cedar, but Texas is big. You can't hide that. I mean, Florida's over here. I'm trying to see. Here we go. There's Florida, but bottom line, everywhere in between, Texas is coming in the league in Oklahoma. How much you can? But is it maybe perfect timing? I'm gonna ask both of y'all this question. We're going from a 4 to a 12-team playoff. So I think in the SEC with strength of schedule, a 9-3, 10-2 certainly will get you in that playoff. Vince, agree or disagree?
I do agree with that record, with a couple of losses in the SEC, with the strength of schedule you're going to have, especially with those additions. I do think that it's perfect that the expansion of the league comes with the expansion of the college football playoff. I think that pairs up great. But look, the SEC, no matter what the format is, once they go in a couple of years to 14 or whatever the format, from 4 to 12 to 4, it doesn't matter. The SEC is always going to have the most teams or right there close to the most teams, and they're going to succeed in it. So not worried about that. And it's going to, the biggest thing is that with all these changes throughout all of college football, you're going to have to double take and think twice about who's where and all that kind of fun stuff. Tobe Awaka, the basketball team, just went to Arizona. I saw him listed as him picking. He picks a Big 12 school. I'm like, what? Really? I thought he went to Arizona. Oh wait, yeah. Now Arizona's in the Big 12.
Right.
So
yeah, it is. I just forgot. Yeah, I mean the Pac-2. I mean, do we even know what's going to happen with Oregon State and Washington State this year? What is
Oregon
the latest?
State's going to play an independent baseball schedule, I know.
Really?
And they've got those two schools are going to play with the WAC in terms of football. Yeah. They won't be in the conference, but they matched up scheduling wise. But yeah, Oregon State says we ain't messing with this. We're big enough. We can in baseball. We can do what we want to. So they're going to play an independent schedule. But it is weird. I did the same thing, Vince, when BYU was in the NCAA tournament and they were talking about, and this year in the Big 12, I went, wait a minute, that is right. It doesn't make any sense. I go back and I think, it's going to be great to have Oklahoma and Texas in here. I wish Oklahoma State had come too. They would have kind of rounded up the whole group here. But what I will say, to go back to your original question, I don't care whether it's 4, I don't care whether it's 8, 12, 20, whatever. Half the teams are going to be from the SEC and the Big Ten, probably.
Yeah, I mean, 29 of the 40 spots in the CFP have gone to Big Ten or SEC schools. Now they're going to get 58% of the money. That's going to be
a good deal they worked out.
Yeah, they sure did. They've worked out a really good deal. And we're going the super conferences. It's what we're going to have. The ACC, for both of y'all, and they're first cousins of the SEC. Very similar. Their footprint overlaps in many cases, as does the Big 12 footprint. Okay. Which one of those conferences is most likely to fold and go somewhere else, or just what is the future for? Which one of them are you most concerned about?
I would say the ACC, because they're trying to get in the SEC. All the reports are they're trying to do anything they can to become part of the larger conference when it gets larger.
Yeah. Well, we just got a couple of more minutes, and I know both of y'all have got to go. Vince, I saw that, and Vince, I want your thoughts, because I don't want to see it happen, is what I'm saying. I love to see sports good all over the country. I'm an SEC man, but I also want to see it good around the country because it's good for the morale of the country.
I agree. And, to expand on what Dudley said, it's the volatility of the members, right? Florida State's the lawsuits at Florida State, that's going to determine a lot on whether they can get out of it, and then how many teams follow suit. You're already starting to see others play that copycat approach and exploring getting out. So because those schools have already looked to get out and their TV deal was so outdated and locked down for such a long period of time, Big 12 been a little bit more progressive. Maybe the names, when you put them side by side, don't match up, but just the state of the league, I see, is in more danger. But I'm with you. I don't want to see that happen. Rick Neuheisel said this before. He feels like we're going through all these growing pains, but then we're going to eventually get a reset to where it does become more regionalized in the end. We just got to take some lumps before we get there.
Yeah. And look, the regional part is what's made it always so much fun. And now you got the ACC with Stanford and Cal coming in this year. SMU, and it's going to be several years before I think they can be in the league. They're passing the hat around, but I think they'll be okay there in Hind Park in Dallas. But it's the future. You know what? 101 years ago, just remember this, none of us were around. In 1923, the Southern Conference had 23 members. In 1933, the SEC was founded. Took a lot of them with them. In 1953, the ACC was founded. Took some more. But the Southern Conference footprint went from Virginia to Texas, pretty much everybody in between. This is not the first time we've had a big shuffling of the chairs, and this is not the Titanic. We'll figure it out. But anyway, Dudley, how do they follow you again? And Vince, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hogville.net, fearlessfriday.com, and Twitter handles Dead Sports, DED Sports.
All right. Thank you, Vince.
Yeah, you can follow me on all the socials. Same handle. It's Vince Sports, VINCE Sports, Instagram, Facebook, X, and then on YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube channel there. And then on our website, 991thesportsanimal.com for podcasts and so much more. Tennessee baseball going to Florida this weekend. My partner on the morning show, John Wilkerson, will have the call of that. So do a lot on the Vol Network, but doing those home baseball games. But there's a lot going on, and check out those socials for all our content.
Never a dull moment. And John David Badur, huge Tennessee fanatic, loves when you come on this show. People in Memphis are starved for Vol content, and they say when Vince comes on, we feel orange again. So let me say this. Friday morning, we got Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, coming on with us. Paul Feinbaum will join us Friday as well. Another stacked show tomorrow. Hey, hit that smash the subscribe button on there. Excellent job, as always, by our executive producer, Brendan Martin. It's not just one person doing a show. It's an entire group with the best guests. Also thank Connor O'Gara in the first segment. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Every day, go out and make great things happen. You're the only one who can write your own story. Make it positive. See you, folks. Out of here.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.